speaker today. Kara is one of our coaches and has been for a couple of years. Kara discovered a love for the career services industry when she was 22. She had gotten her English degree and had a full-time job as a copywriter, but it really didn't fulfill what she wanted in life. And so she enrolled in a class called What Color's Your Parachute, which is an old book on the job search that many of y'all may have seen. And it opened up a whole new idea for her to pursue, to use her storytelling skills to help people craft their resume and to help craft their stories for the interview process. And so she continued that work until the recession hit. And she found herself divorced and needing to provide for her 3 children after a decade of being a stay-at-home mom. She was new to Texas, and she didn't have a lot of connections here in town, but she put her resume to work, and she came and was mentored by Job Seekers Network. A few years later, she took one of our workshops called Living a Called Life, and with some nudging from God, led her to volunteer to be a resume coach for us, where she rediscovered this passion for helping people tell their stories. And now she is the founder of Kara D. Bell Careers, and she feels blessed to work full-time with people to achieve their career goals. She's a certified resume writer as well as an online profile expert, and we're just so happy to have you come share this morning. Kara, come on up.
Thanks, Greg. Good morning. That was louder than I expected it to be. It's good to be here. It's good to see you all this morning. I just wanted to stop and acknowledge, this is one of my favorite verses. A mentor encouraged me to memorize it. But the one word I love the most in this is the word but. Because God tells us, do not be anxious about anything, but He knows that we get anxious. And as somebody who's very prone to anxiety, I go back to this verse again and again because He gives us a way to deal with the anxiety. So I just want to stop a moment and say a little prayer for us. Creator God, many of us come to you today filled with anxiety about the world, about our families, about our work situations. We thank you for the opportunity to support one another. Please calm our anxious hearts and lead us open to however you wish to bless us today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Oops. Oh, there we go. Okay, today's all about LinkedIn. This is just a topic for me that I am enjoying so much right now. There's so much to learn in LinkedIn. You guys probably have seen there seems to be no end to the settings and buttons and ways that you can use LinkedIn. So we're going to dive into this today. But before we do, I just want to take you back in time to a time before LinkedIn didn't exist. So Doc, would you fire up the DeLorean? We're going to go back a little further. Oh, I didn't mean to go back. Wrong stop. We're going to change that. 1980s is not where I wanted to go. We're going to go back even one more. Fire up the DeLorean again. Here we go. I want to introduce you to my grandparents. This is Tom DeAndrea and Anna Antasico. My middle initial, D, comes from that DeAndrea. I was raised in a small town community, Cranston, Rhode Island, very Italian-American community. I thought everybody was Italian until I went to college, just the way it was. But these are my grandparents. And in the 1940s, they were the owners of a restaurant and a bar called the Old Diamond Cafe. They were married 10 years. They didn't think that they could have any children. And then my grandmother gets pregnant after 10 years of marriage, pregnant with my dad. They have a bar. My grandfather decides that a bar is not the place he wants to raise his children, so they sell the bar, and now they have to decide what they want to do next. They're looking for steady jobs, benefits. They don't want to be entrepreneurs anymore. They want to be able to have a better family life. Sound familiar to anybody who's coming out of consulting or coming out of entrepreneurship? So very, very familiar story. What's really cool about their story is, of course, they're in this small town community, and my grandmother's job in the bar was she was the cook, she was the hostess, she took care of the rowdy sailors. This is what she did. She was kind of the front person. My grandfather, he handled the back stuff. He was a quieter one, and if equipment broke, he could fix it. I mean, there wasn't anything my grandfather couldn't do when it came to equipment-wise. People around them knew this. They knew they sold the bar, now they're looking for work. So Connie, my grandmother's friend, happened to be the secretary at the high school. She finds out the principal needs a kitchen manager at the high school. So she says, oh, you got to call my friend Ann. She can handle rowdy sailors, drunken sailors at a bar. I'm sure she can handle those high school kids, right? So my grandmother ends up going to get a job as a kitchen manager. She retired from that job at the high school, actually a year before I went there. If you were a student in that high school, you got homemade spaghetti and meatballs, homemade pizza. It was amazing. And then my grandfather, his friend Joe, worked for the city, and they were looking for a mechanic. And he says, oh, you got to call Tom. He can fix anything. And that's how my grandfather got his job as a city mechanic. Their network, their community really worked for them. So let's talk about what worked for them. First of all, they had marketable skills, right? I mean, being a cook, being a chef, being a kitchen manager, being able to handle a lot of moving pieces, that was marketable. Being a mechanic was something that was needed at the time. So they had some marketable skills. Other people that they knew were aware that they had these marketable skills. They could describe them. So they were able to help. They were able to connect the people who needed their help with the people who could provide their help. And then the final thing is, people really want to help. Does anybody get the feeling that things have changed? Do you ever feel like people don't want to help so much? Do you think that's true? I think we get that feeling for a few reasons. One, what's changed is that our roles and our work histories are much more complex than they were in the 1940s in my grandmother's and my grandfather's day and age. It can be a lot harder to communicate the value that we bring. I find that it's a lot of people don't even know how to describe what they do because of the complexity. So that's a big problem, because if we can't describe what we do, how is anybody else going to be able to help us, to be able to connect us with the people that we can help? And the other reason, the other thing that's changed is my little Italian and American neighborhood was pretty small. I could walk the whole thing. We all knew each other. Now our communities are global. We move around a lot, and in the midst of that, it can be really hard to keep up. So, the cool thing about humans is we invent new tools to deal with the complexity. And certainly that's the case with LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been designed to help us deal with the complexity of these work situations. And that little superhero guy just knocked over the old Rolodex. Anyone remember the Rolodex? My dad had one of those, you know. He was a businessman also. He was an entrepreneur. And if he wanted to do business with someone, their business card sat in his Rolodex. So if we want to have a network, we're sitting in somebody's Rolodex, but today we're sitting on somebody's LinkedIn page. So that's the difference. Which brings us to this point. If you are not on LinkedIn, you are dead to the corporate world. It's something that career experts are saying now. It seems pretty harsh, but those of us who don't move along as technology moves along, we really do risk becoming obsolete. If we resisted email and stuck with our Rolodexes and letter writing, that was going to be difficult. That would be a difficult journey. So LinkedIn is super important, and my goal today is to help you kind of demystify the process, take some of the fear out, and give you some practical tools that you can use. So in a network of 660 million plus people, it's growing, it's global. How are you going to stand out? That's the big question. How will you stand out in a network of 660 million people? Well, there's three ways that you can stand out. One is with your profile. And with your profile, it's really important that you tell a good story, you tell a great career story, but it's got to be marketable. Because if my grandmother and grandfather didn't have skills that the people in the town could use, and others couldn't describe those skills for them, then they would never have gotten those job offers. So I think where people mistake a lot of times in their profile is they're telling a story, but their story isn't simple, it isn't marketable. So we're going to talk about that. Keywords make the bots work for you. Recruiters do it, right? Recruiters are using these keyword searches to help find the people that can solve their problems. Well, we can do the same thing. So we'll talk about how to do some of that today. And finally, we get to the point where we're using LinkedIn to make connections. This is the whole point of this platform. It keeps us connected professionally. It gets rid of a lot of the noise of other platforms like Facebook, which aren't particularly suited for professionals. It's more than just our online business card. It is really a place where we can interact with and learn from professionals in our field. Okay, so let's speak to telling a marketable career story. I know we say this all the time. Does someone want to say it for me? What do we tell you you need before you start your job search? It's right there on the poster, a target. You need a job target. And the reason you need a target, and this is all about being marketable, and it's one of the hardest things to get people to do because people tell me all the time they want to remain open. So they have 3 or 4 or 5 different jobs that they can do. They want to remain open. And they feel like that's going to give them more opportunities if they stay open. They have all these different skills. But it's really not true that people want to remain open. I know it's not true because I get the long list all the times of all the things that people don't want. So I know it's not true that you're kind of open to anything. The idea is to hone it down so we can really get you a target. Because if you can't hit a target if you can't hit a bullseye if you don't even hang the paper on the wall. It's super, super important. Before we go to this, I want to share another verse that's one of my go-tos, which is from Ephesians, and it says, "For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus, so we can do the good He planned for us long ago." I love this verse. And the reason I love this verse is because I think it speaks to our confusion that we have a lot when we're dealing with, we confuse work with our identities. And I think this is a big reason why people don't pick targets. Our identities are much different than our work. Our identities are this: we're children of God, we're His creations, we're His masterpieces. We are uniquely designed to do the work that He has planned out for us in His life. And God gives us a lot of talents. I mean, so many of us, we all have a whole host of talents. I'm amazed when I talk to people. You hear, they're doing software over here, and then at home they're building things. And we all have these vast arrays of talents. But the problem is we get stuck. And I see a couple of places where we get stuck because of this identity confusion. And one of them is that people aren't willing to give up their past titles and their past stories in the service of some future goal, right? A lot of times we cling to that. Well, that was a great title, or that was a great salary. But we may be moving into a different season of our lives where God wants us to use different talents and different opportunities. So if we cling to those things as our identity, it just kind of removes, it presents an obstacle for us to be able to find out what God has in store for us next. And the other place I see this confusion is when we don't feel confident about the talents that God's given us. And I've been both these places, so I know, that's why I love this verse so much, is we lack confidence. God's ready to push us here, but we kind of shrink back, and we don't want to share. We don't want to share our successes. We don't want to share our talents. We don't want to brag. But that can also keep us stuck too. So this verse is a reminder to me when I kind of get tempted to be in one of those two camps, and that prevents me from moving forward, from picking a target. Okay, back to the target. I'm going to show you with the rest of this LinkedIn presentation why being open is such a poor strategy. I really think that by the end of this presentation, you're going to see why that being open can really hurt you. Today's technology, LinkedIn, ATS, all of it, because we need to make sense of the noise, it's driven by keywords. It's driven by artificial intelligence. It's driven by algorithms. We may want to rage against the machine, but it's not going to do us any good because the more we fight back, the more we fight against those algorithms, the less they're going to work for us. But the good news is if we understand them, if we know how they work, it's just a new tool. It's a new game. It's a new way of doing things. We can actually reverse engineer and make them work for us. In order to stand out, you're going to have to show you have a target. We're all generalists. We all have many talents. We're all generalists to some degree. But right now, because of the algorithms, because of what companies want, the market and the job search is prioritizing specialization. And that's what we're going to look at today. So in order to be specialized, in order to be targeted, you really do need to decide. And Becky, Craig, we all talk about that all the time, but it's really important to decide on a job target. And there are many ways to decide. We have design and focus. We have living the called life. We have stuck. But my advice on deciding is look at your last 10 to 15 years of experience, because those are going to be the most relevant. Those are going to be what recruiters look at. They want to see what you're doing. It can be paid and unpaid. Look at what is marketable, what jobs are available that overlap with the things that you've been doing the last 10 to 15 years. And then the last thing is, what do you like? What do you like about the things that you've been doing those last 10 to 15 years? If you can get all of those things to overlap, that's a great target, because you want to see that especially if you want to stay in Austin, you want to know that your target, there's plenty of jobs out there for your target. It's marketable. So just that's one way to get at it. Design and focus is another, and certainly in our stuck sessions and all the different things that we offer here, we speak more to target. Okay, let's talk more. Once you have a target, then you want to use the keywords that speak to that target. So there's 3 ways to deal with that. And it's just the same on a resume. Anyone who's been in my resume workshops, what's happening with LinkedIn is very, very much the same. It's speaking to those need for people to find the keywords that represent the jobs that they're looking for, the jobs that they need done. So you want diverse keywords, which is just variations, right? If you have senior spelled out, you might have senior abbreviated, because as you know, if you look at all different job titles, everybody does them different ways when they're searching. So you have human beings searching. Are they going to look for a senior manager, or are they going to look for a senior spelled out manager? We don't know, but we're going to cover them with diversity. Same thing with job titles. You can, once you decide on a target, you want to find the most popular job title for that particular target. But there's going to be more than one. So the example here is outside sales, territory manager. There are lots of things that this role is called, and you want to make sure that you cover them. And then once you have your diversity figured out, you want to look at density. You want to use as many of these as you can. Your LinkedIn profile has an advantage that your resume does not have. Your LinkedIn profile is, your resume is, for most people, 2 pages, but your LinkedIn profile, fully filled out and done, if somebody were to print it out, it's 46 pages. That gives you lots and lots and lots of opportunity to use the keywords that are important to your industry. Much easier to get found that way. So you want to use as many of them as you can, peppered throughout your profile, and I'll show you the different places where you can put them. And the last thing is relevancy. You want to keep those keywords that are relevant to your future target. All of this is future looking. Remember we talked about letting go of the past, figuring out what your future target is. We are writing our profile not as a catalog of our history, but as an arrow for where we want to go. That's where that target is. So any keywords that are not relevant, you want them gone, because they are just going to, they're going to detract. They're going to make it harder for the bots to find you if you have lots of stuff on there. Old stuff, new stuff, whatever, that does not match your keyword targets. So let's talk a little bit about how we can find some of those keywords. Does anyone use Google Jobs? Yeah? I like that search a lot because Google aggregates from lots of different job boards. And you can really use this for research. So if you I'm going to take my grandmother's example, and I Googled, you can type in job and use a Boolean search. If you don't know what Boolean searches are, you can Google them, but it's just a way to group keywords together so you get the return that you want. But very easy if you Google it. Kitchen manager in quotes, that means I want kitchen manager together as one word. Jobs, kitchen manager. Okay, great. So I pulled up several jobs. I think there were over 100 once I clicked on the bottom of that jobs. But I can see right at the front, what do you see? You see kitchen manager. Is there another keyword in there? Somebody said it? Chef. Yeah, so you've got kitchen manager, you've got chef. So you can look through these things and you can see what are the general titles that they're using for the thing that you want to be. And then on top of that, as you dive into the job descriptions, and here's where I do get kind of 80s old school. I will print stuff out and get out my highlighters and just highlight common keywords because I like to have my hands on it. I like to look at it visually. And I will incorporate those keywords into my profile. If you've got 5 or 6 job descriptions that are all around the same title, you can really get a lot of keywords that way. So this is one of my favorite tools. Google Jobs. So we're going to use those keywords to fill out the primary parts of a LinkedIn profile that really matter for keywords. The most highest indexed, which means the most searched in the LinkedIn algorithms, is your headline. That's the thing that shows right at top. I'll show you an example of it in just a minute. You have 120 characters. And people don't use those full 120 characters. This is when companies, recruiters who are looking for what you do, whether it's a senior internal project manager, whether it's a kitchen manager, whether it's a software engineer, they are Googling on job titles. Lots of times you'll see leader or an Austin rock star. But people generally aren't searching on leader and rock star. They're searching on job titles. And that is where it's really important to have those job titles loaded. Okay, same place. This is just like a resume. Job title headers as well. So in your experience section, where you have 120 characters in the headline, you have 100 characters in each of your job titles. So if you think about your job title headers as another opportunity to get those diverse, dense, and relevant keywords in, you have 100 characters to do that in your job title. If you go look at your history and your forward-looking target is one thing, but your job titles are all over the place, that is telling the bots you're not a fit. So it's really important that you make them match up. And somebody asked me earlier, can I change my job title? Well, absolutely you can change your job title. There are a few examples when you can't, and they tend to be high compliance industries, certain industries in finance where they have SEC regulations, but for most of us, we can totally change our job titles. I was director of communications for a very small family-run wealth management firm. If I went to Dell and tried to be director of communications, they'd probably laugh at me. Same title, completely different job. So it is perfectly fine to change your titles. In fact, it's preferable to change your job titles to match. And I'll also say this. If you are going for an HR role, and you were in a company, and maybe you were in a smaller company, and HR was part of the job that you did with office management, but you want to move to an HR role, emphasize the 10 or 20 or 25% that you did that was HR. It matches, you did it, all the other things are not relevant because you're going for that HR role. So you just pull those pieces from your history that are relevant. Skills and endorsements, we'll dive into that again in just a minute. Do y'all know where skills and endorsements are? Okay. It used to be kind of a big deal a while ago in LinkedIn, and then it fell by the wayside. Well, right now, LinkedIn is really trying to beef up the skills and endorsement section. So it is becoming much, much more important, and what they are trying to do is using predictive text. So when you type in when you start typing in your keywords, and I'll show you an example of that, you actually get some suggested phrases and words. So I would encourage you to use the predictive text, and then when you get endorsements, if you get endorsements from your supervisors or from your coworker, LinkedIn figures that all into the algorithm. So really getting your skills and endorsements to match up with the rest of your profile with that diversity, density, relevancy, all of it. Same thing with the about. You've got 2,000 characters. So today we won't have time to dive into like all the how-tos of this, but the good news is JSN right now is working on second-hour workshops to really give you deep dives into all of these different pieces. So you will have more time to be hitting this in great detail going forward. Okay. So let's talk about that 120-character branded headline. So my grandmother, if she were around today, and we were going to try to get her that kitchen manager job, here she is with her headline, owner, bartender, and chef at Diamond Cafe. Well, what's the challenge with that? She's looking for a steady job with benefits, better hours for her kids. She wants to work for somebody else, maybe the city. What's the challenge with that job title?
It's not specific. It's all over the place.
It's not specific. It's all over the place, yeah? It's at the bar where they don't want to be. That's right. It's behind looking. Bartender. Well, if someone's looking for a bartender, she don't want to be up all night. She's about to have a baby, right? I love what Craig says. He has a saying, if you don't want it to stick, don't put it in. And that's true, right? If you had something in your past that you really don't want to do anymore, don't put it in your profile, because what you put in your profile is going to be the thing that sticks. The other thing, and I deal with this a lot with entrepreneurs and consultants, is they want to go work with someone else. So instead of focusing on the roles that they had at their job that they owned, at their company that they owned, they focus on the fact that they're an owner. But what does that communicate to companies? You don't take directions well. You may not play nice with others, right? This is not the message we want to send. So if I were rewriting my grandmother's headline for 2020, here's how I might write it. Before, she's the owner, bartender, and chef at Diamond Cafe. And after, here she is, Food service and kitchen manager, head chef, health department certified cook, homemade meatballs for the masses. And I don't know what happened, man. She made some good meatballs. I really miss them. I don't know what happened, but there was actually a little icon. I think it'll show up when it pulled up on Craig's computer. I think it disappeared, but it's a little spaghetti and meatball icon right before there. Gives it a little spice, gives it a little headline. Is it pretty clear what she does? The other cool thing about this headline, first of all, it uses the whole 120 characters, but what's really cool about this headline is that you get credit for any combination of keywords that's in it. So if you want food service certified, that's in there. Chef, all the combinations, kitchen chef, if somebody types in kitchen chef to do a search, she gets all of those combinations of the keywords. And if you have room, you can add a nice little tagline that sets you apart from people. But do you see the difference? This is much more likely to get her found for the position that she wants. Okay, same thing. Now we've got 100 characters, and the 100 characters are for your job titles. So this is in your experience section. You have the opportunity to list your experience. By the way, those of you who have consulting companies or you own a company, whether it be a restaurant or a software company or whatever, you can, when you add your company, create a company page so you can get an icon that looks a lot more real than the default gray ones that they put on there. It just makes your profile look so much better. But this is where you can hit. So by the way, the first one is the first place where LinkedIn is indexing is that headline. The second place is these job titles. So if you want to make the algorithms work for you, these are two really great places to hit. Okay, let's talk about skills and endorsements. This is my mistake. I hadn't paid, I was helping clients. It's one of those cases of the cobbler's kids have no shoes. I paid no attention to my skills and endorsements. So in that before picture, I had as my top skills, so you get up to 50, but the top 3 travel with your profile. And if someone goes to endorse you, they're likely going to endorse you for one of their top 3, one of your top 3. And I finished somebody's resume, and I looked on LinkedIn, and I got an endorsement for editing. Well, I can edit, but I'm a resume writer. That's not helping the bots find me, and that was my fault because I didn't have the right keywords on there. So if you noticed in the after one, I have resume writing, career development coaching, and instructor-led training. These are all things that I really hope to be endorsed for. But the other thing, remember that diversity, density, and relevancy? When you have compound keywords, you get credit for every combination of those keywords. So if you use the compound ones, that's going to add more juice to your profile too, because you're capturing that diversity, that density, and that relevancy. So I could get credit for resume coaching or resume training. So definitely go back and look at your endorsements. And don't worry if you have 30 endorsements for something that's old and not relevant anymore. LinkedIn's revamped their way that they do endorsements, so you can just delete anything that's not relevant. If it's not where you're going in the future, then take it off your profile. So it's really worth it to spend some time on the skills and endorsements section. Okay, this is my grandmother. If we were going to make her a profile today, that's the best picture I could find last minute. I would ask you to be turning towards the camera instead of off to the side. But she was a really cool lady. So again, if you look at that, the thing about this is when you get to the connection piece, after you've taken the time to fully round out your profile with your target, making it clear where you're going, not where you've been, and you brand, just by putting a little picture in the header that shows what you do. What do you see when you see a profile like that? Meatballs. You see a human. You see a real human. Is it inviting? Is it pretty clear what she does for a living? There's no doubt, right? So let's say somebody gets to her via a search and they're looking for a kitchen manager. They're looking for someone who can cook a lot of food for, people. It's on her profile, and that's just the contact card. So your first connection with people is always what you're presenting to the world. If they pounce on your profile, it kind of feels that way sometime, right? Because we're all so quick and we're moving around. But if they jump on your profile and they see that it's relevant, how likely are they to keep looking? But if they jump on your profile and there's confusion, if this said restaurant owner, or if it said bartender, there would be some confusion. They'd probably bounce right off. So that's super important. The other thing that this does and allows you to connect in a global world is my grandmother has cut and pasted. She has 500 connections. This was definitely before her time. She has 500 plus connections. Does that give her profile some credibility? Yeah, this is not anything your resume can do. Your resume can't do this. So she has connections. Hopefully she has connections with the same people in that small town that she was in who can help her find that job, who know what she does. Okay, let's talk about the power of the network on LinkedIn. If you look at your network, when I took this screenshot, I only had 185 LinkedIn connections. In LinkedIn, we call those first-level connections. That means I am directly connected with 185 people. Do you know what second and third-level connections are? Yes. It's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Yeah. So the second level connections would not be people I'm directly connected with, but they would be people connected with those people. And here's where it gets really cool. I only had 185 connections to start, but look at the size of my accessible network. 300,000 people, almost. Could that come in handy? To have second level connections with 300,000 people? Yeah, well, let me give you an example of why it can. Okay. One trick that you can use on LinkedIn, and everybody's like, who do we connect with? You connect with friends and family. Well, that's good, but I'm all about the hacks. I want to find strategic ways to help me get where I want to go. So we can connect with friends and family, and that's great. You should do that. But who else can we connect with? Well, this target company strategy gives you a great way to figure out who to connect with. If you've done your homework, you will have a job target. You will have decided if you prefer to work in Fortune 500 companies or a mid-sized company. You will have decided on an industry. You will have decided on a location. And hopefully you can narrow that down to about 15 to 20 companies where you'd really like to work. Maybe you see some job openings there. You can narrow that down to the places where you'd like to work. So again, we're going to be taking a deep dive into this. We've got one of our coaches, Paul, is working on doing this as a second-hour breakout for you guys. But real quick, and you can Google how to do this, if you follow the company, and that just means searching in the company and clicking the follow button, turn on the job alerts and notify recruiters, and this is where it gets really cool. You make 5 internal connections. That means you can connect with people who are in the company. You may not know them yet, but you can connect with them, and we're going to give you some examples of that. And then the other thing is post and share company news. What this does is tell the company that you're interested. interested in working for them. And then the other thing that this does is it shows the recruiter that you're kind of a high priority candidate. You have connections, and if you've done your profile right, it's very, very clear to them which jobs you qualify for. So when they have a job that matches your profile, guess who's going to get pulled up? This is a really powerful way to make connections. And Gary's sitting over there nodding at me. He's one of my favorite stories because he tried this trick. Gary, can you, I don't know where the microphone is, but,
I'm pretty loud.
okay, he can be loud.
All right. Well, this afternoon I'm going to jump on a plane to have some interviews tomorrow in LA with a company that I've been trying to get into. And in January, I sent in an application and got nothing back at all. So instead of trying to connect in with the top people, which is what I've been trying to do, I LinkedIn connected to about 3 levels down.
Oh, thanks, Craig.
And after connecting in with 3 levels down, waited a couple days, and then put in a connection request to the guy who'd be interviewing me, and bam, he said yes. And then a day and a half later, I got a message that said, hey, this is the HR screening department. We'd like to have a phone screen with you. Are you available? So it took the risk away from him, when he saw that, oh, this guy already knows people in my company. And I'll give the microphone back to you. But there was one lady who I connected with who I could help. There was something that I saw she was doing that I knew someone who could maybe connect with her. So I just offered that. I don't know if that came into play or not, but it doesn't hurt any. So thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, I've heard multiple of these stories by connecting with people at the company, and it's real easy to connect. So this is one way that you can do it. If you go to your network page, you can pull up your second level connections, and you can pull up the name of your company. So remember what I said about the size of my 300,000 person network? I have people at companies that I had no idea I even had. Granted, it's a connection to a connection, but it's a lot easier to bring a second level connection closer because they're already in your company. So if you put in that filter there, if you put the current company in the title, I might come up with 6 people that I have second level connections to in that company. And then I'll look at their profiles. Maybe we went to the same school. Maybe we went to the same college. Maybe we're from the same town. Maybe we like the same sports team. Maybe we have somebody in common that we know really, really well, but it makes it easy to reach out. Now, this is becoming more and more common because we all know that going forward, we're not staying in jobs as long as we were before. So we all need to have big networks that we keep active. But an easy way to connect with somebody is to say, hey, if they're the same job title as you, it's always great to connect with other project managers in Austin, Texas. Boom, that's it. You're not asking for a job, and that's where it gets dicey. I think people, they ask, well, I'm applying for a job here, and I wanted to ask some questions. That's a little bit of an ask that people kind of back away from because they're afraid they want to help, but they're afraid they can't help you. But they'll certainly start out by helping with a connection. And I love Gary's story because he was able to easy connect with some people in the company, and then the company saw that he already had, the hiring manager saw he had connections there. Boom, made a phone call. So this can be a really effective strategy. I love strategic approaches. Isn't this kind of a very systemic, easy way to tackle this? It got me so excited when I learned about this because otherwise I just kind of feel like I'm shooting at darts. Who do I need to connect with? I'm not sure all the time. Love this strategy. Something else that I want to tell you about is when you go and look at people, the really cool thing is you get to see their profiles and people will ask, well, isn't that like stalking? Well, I mean, we all put our profiles out there publicly. Isn't it really cool when you go to meet somebody and they say, oh, I read about you, I read about your work. It makes us feel known, I saw that you went to Baylor, my daughter's at Baylor. We love that stuff. We like to be known, and it's the same when you're talking to other people. It's not stalking if it's a public profile. People get nervous about that, but it makes us feel good. I know it makes me feel good when someone took the time to see what I spent hours putting out there. Definitely makes a difference. The other thing I want to mention, for those of you who are kind of shy, I read a story about a hairdresser out in the Bay Area in California, and she just moved to the Bay Area. She needed business. She got on LinkedIn. All she did was look at other people's profiles. She didn't message them. She didn't do anything. She just popped in and looked at other people's profiles. Guess what? If you have a LinkedIn Premium membership, which a lot of professionals now do, and we would, if you can afford it, would encourage you to get one, all she did was look at their profiles. But then, in turn, they're like, well, who's looking at my profile and why? So you go and you look at her profile. And she's got her beautiful salon with the work that she does. And they interviewed the people who called her after she had just looked at her profile. And they said, well, I needed a new stylist, and I thought she liked my hair. That's why she was looking at my profile. So I love that story because that's a simple thing you can do. You can just go look at somebody's profile. When you do that, they're going to look back at your profile. That's the way it works. And if your profile is fully written out and optimized to show that you have these marketable skills that can solve their problem, that may be enough to initiate a call. That's what I love about this. Okay. Once we do all that, a lot of you are on Facebook. I'm a Facebook dropout from 5 years ago. But what I love about LinkedIn is that it is completely focused on professional stuff. Good news, mostly. These are things, people say, well, I'm not a writer. Well, these are things that you can share. Best practices in your industry in the form of news articles. You can share, some people will write up conference takeaways. This is a great way to show that you're an expert in your field. You go to a conference, you write up takeaways, share them with people in your network. Awesome. I love it when people do that when I can't be at a conference. Any articles or books or interviews you've enjoyed, you just share. But again, the focus is on keyword density, relevancy, and diversity. You want to make sure that you're sharing things that are consistent with your profession, with your job target, with your brand, and you want to be positive. People want to hire people who are happy and successful where they are. Where some job seekers get lost a little bit on LinkedIn is they brand themselves as a professional job seeker. They can get on there and they comment on the job search and they comment on not having heard back from recruiters. That doesn't help because what you want to look like is the expert in the field that you are, not a professional job seeker. So I would really encourage you to share the news that's relevant to your industry. That's what LinkedIn's for, make connections with other people in your industry. Okay, I forgot to put my phone up here, but we're going to try something. Some of you have done this before. I know Elizabeth knows how to do this. We're going to try to sit here and connect with everybody in the room. So if you go to that step 1 and you have your phone out, if your cellular data is on and your location is turned on while using the app,
Tell them to turn on the LinkedIn.
yeah, pull up the LinkedIn app. So that's in the settings. The number 1 is in the settings. You pull up the LinkedIn app. And then you can have the location while you're using. And by the way, I think this is something we should all do every morning when we come to job seekers. Because the easiest way to build our networks right now is with the people here. Okay, so once you have the location turned on, you can go to My Network and click on, it's at the bottom of your LinkedIn mobile page, from the home page, yep. And it's those 2 little people there. You click on My Network. And then the third thing is once you click on My Network, it brings up that little blue button with the plus on it. You click on that. If it works, it should show you all the people in the room who are also doing the same thing.
On your settings, you need to be, what do you need to have activated?
Craig, you sound like a, I was like, where's the voice coming from?
You need to have your Bluetooth on?
I don't know if you need to,
Try to do it, your phone will ask for it.
yeah,
So just try to do it, and then your phone will say, turn this on in the settings, and so you don't even need to know.
yeah.
Mine just says find nearby off.
Okay, so click on it. If it says find nearby off, click on it.
It goes to this, but it doesn't give me an option to turn it on.
But did it pull up people in the room?
No, it just says that nearby members can only discover when you're on this page.
There's a button next to it.
So click nearby, click where it says find nearby off, click that.
There, I did, and it.
Okay.
There may be two buttons. Click the other one.
See, if I go to my network.
Yeah. So, does anybody pull up anybody in the room?
Oh yeah, there's a ton of people on.
Oh, good, good. Keep it on, because I'm going to go grab my phone when I got done here and connect with you all. One thing I would, and if you don't know how to do it, find a partner who does know how to do it, and they can show you. But I think this is something we should all do when we come to job seekers in the morning. But I would take it even a step further. I would take it a step further, and that is when you connect with people, go and find them. Sit down next to them, have a conversation, find out what they're looking for, where they've worked. We don't know who we know in this room that can help each other. I've seen it happen all the time with job seekers. Maybe a role wasn't right for them, and then it becomes right for somebody else. So as you connect with the people in the room, get to know them, look at their profiles, and then take a few moments to sit outside and have a conversation with them. That's where the power of LinkedIn becomes really useful. Okay. All right, so I did want to mention about LinkedIn Premium. It is expensive. I think it's less expensive if you pay for it a year at a time. Some of you may not want to do that. But one really powerful thing that it does is it allows you to see everyone who's viewed your profile in the last 90 days. So if you take all this time to do all these things to your profile, to keyword optimize it, you're going to want to experiment. You're going to want to know who's finding you. Are they from the right companies? Are they hits from where you want targets? That's going to be really important for you to know. And the other thing is LinkedIn Learning. Some of us, when we're unemployed, we need to update our skills. Well, you get what's called lynda.com. It was bought out by LinkedIn, and it's video training that's included with your LinkedIn subscription. You can learn all kinds of things, and training does not have to be formal to include it on your resume and on your profile. If you learn a new skill, however you learn it, you can include it, even if it was informal courses. So I think for job seekers, especially today, and even going into career management, LinkedIn's not going away. This is going to be a tool that's going to help us be adaptable and flexible as we move forward with our careers. And I just want to end where I started, because again, I go back to this verse over and over again. I have it memorized. After I've just read the news, I sit and I think about this verse. But remember the but. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation. So here we're being told not to be anxious, but in every situation. And sometimes I get a little anxiety before I go to connect with somebody on LinkedIn that I feel may be challenging to connect with, or I may think, oh, they won't remember me, or they don't know me. And that's when I take a moment, I breathe, and in this situation, I say a little prayer, and I hit the button. Makes all the difference in the world. Yes? Mm-hmm.
What's a good way to reach out to someone? I mean, is it prepared for them? Like they know you might be applying, but
You know, it depends on the person, and that's where I really liked Gary's strategy about making sure if you're connected with other people in the company, the hiring manager may be more open to connecting with you. But also, some people are really LinkedIn power users, and the way you can tell is you can tell by their activity. If you scroll down on their profile and look at their activity, and they're sharing constantly and they have lots of connections, those people may be more likely to connect and engage. But I really think the more you have connected in the company, maybe at other levels of the company, that you're more likely to get the attention of a hiring manager.
I think that they would think it's weird. I don't know. Oh, hi. Would the hiring manager think it's a little weird if you get like a request from them?
Some people might think it's weird. You know, I mean, I'm weird. I can be weird sometimes. Some people might think it's weird. I think more often people are just busy, so they're less likely to even reply if they're busy, and even that's not personal. A lot of hiring managers and a lot of recruiters get a ton of reach outs on here. That's why you may have luck with connecting with some of the other people in the company first. But it depends on the hiring manager. I mean, people are different. But if you reach out, they're not gonna, I mean, it's reach out, they didn't respond, they'll probably forget about you in 5 minutes once they look at your profile. So this is really low risk. You're not sitting in somebody's face, you know, asking for anything. It's pretty low risk. It's building your network, back to those things, having an effective profile, showing your marketing skills, your marketable skills, what problems do you solve, making sure that you're making those bots work for you by having all the right keywords, and then on top of that, just starting to make connections, because it's those connections that are going to help you in the future. And yes?
Withdraw an invite. So if you do an invite to this potential manager and they haven't responded in a few weeks, you can withdraw it. And
That's a great idea.
And then you can do it again later if the need arises. And then also, you can also have that opportunity to not send the invite until you get a little bit closer into the process.
Yes.
Because I know as a hiring manager, I didn't accept everybody who was interviewing, but after I met them and there might be a connection.
Yes.
Maybe do it a little bit later in the process.
That's a great idea. You know, instead of asking for business cards, you can connect on LinkedIn. That's a great idea.
Okay, last question.
So I actually have 2 questions. I don't know if there's time for that, but one is, this is all great and I love it. It's talking a lot about being found. And the challenge that I have is I know that a lot of hiring managers and HR folks will use your LinkedIn kind of as your resume. And so I'm struggling with how do I customize, you know, you're supposed to kind of customize a resume for the job, but how do I keep it generic enough that it works after I've submitted for the job when they go look me up?
Yeah.
And kind of struggling on that side of it.
And that's a big challenge because LinkedIn does not allow you to have multiple profiles. And I have people ask me this all the time. That's why we say put a stake in it, because decide on something that is fairly narrow and write to that and apply to that, because that is going to give you a lot more support, not just on being found, but on when you reach out to others and they look back at your profile, you're a match. You're matching something because you're targeted and specific.
I guess what I mean is if you see a job listing that isn't necessarily exactly what it says on your LinkedIn, but you want to apply for that, but then you know they're going to go back to your LinkedIn and it's not exactly speaking to that, but you don't want to change your LinkedIn because you kind of do have it targeted towards the other thing. I just get stuck in that piece.
It should be close enough that there's some overlap, and if there's not any overlap, that's where you have the problem. But if there's some overlap, if there's some overlap, and also you have 46 pages, so maybe if it's not the priority target, you've buried some of that information in your about section, and your experience section, and your education section, so you can still be found. But if it's wildly divergent, that's when things get challenging. Yeah.
So the other question I have is related to making connections. Like generally, I don't agree to connect with someone I haven't met. And I often use the connections, the second piece. For example, like I applied for this job at XYZ company, and now I search for people I know or who know people who work at XYZ company. And then I reach out to them and say, can you make this connection for me? But if I and everybody else are making connections with people they don't really know, then it's not helpful in making that introduction. And so I struggle with, like, do I just, add all these random people I don't know, and then it becomes diluted in terms of its effectiveness?
Well, I would say, somebody asked me this, is like, aren't you supposed to vet everybody in your network? And as our networks are big and global, I can't vet 500 people. I don't know about you. So I think that as long as people are in proximity, they're in your role, they're in your field, they're in your companies that you've worked for, their friends and their families, they're in the realm. I don't think you should be connecting with people you don't know in completely different industries that you've had no conversation with, or different countries. There are people out there to spam. But if your network is relevant and in your field, see what you just described is kind of the opposite of the way we just talked about doing it, which is you wait till you apply for the job and then you connect with people. That's a little bit harder. This idea is being more proactive. It's getting ahead of it and going, I know I like this company. I'm going to be connecting ahead of time. And then when it comes time to apply for the job, I already have the credibility because I have the connections there. So it's a slightly different way of approaching it.
It works great until you find a job that, as a company, you weren't targeting.
Yeah,
Right, and then you still want to make the connections at that place.
yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Kara.
Okay.